World War I is considered one of the greatest catastrophes in human history. It was a conflict that involved many of the world's great powers, drawing in nations from across the globe into a brutal and prolonged struggle. It erupted during a time when the world was witnessing unprecedented industrial and technological advancements, with innovations in machinery, transportation, and communication transforming societies at a rapid pace. But it revealed the dark side of modernity by using these technologies in a devastating war. Tanks, airplanes, and chemical weapons were deployed on a massive scale, leading to unprecedented levels of destruction and loss of life. It was described as the war to end all wars, a phrase that captured the hope that such a conflict would never happen again. However, the reality was far more complex and tragic. In reality, it marked the beginning of a series of conflicts that reshaped the world's political and geographical map. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on the defeated nations, sowing the seeds for future unrest. The aftermath of World War I saw the collapse of empires, the redrawing of borders, and the emergence of new nations. It dramatically altered the fate of nations and set the stage for the geopolitical landscape of the 20th century. In this episode, we will thoroughly explore all aspects of World War I, including the warring parties, the major battles that defined the conflict, and the strategies employed by both sides. We will delve into the far-reaching consequences of the war, examining the widespread destruction it caused, the political upheavals, and the social changes that followed in its wake. Additionally, we will discuss the gains and losses experienced by the nations involved, the staggering number of casualties, and the enduring legacy of this devastating conflict. But before we begin, I would like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue creating high-quality content. By subscribing and activating the notification bell, you ensure that you never miss any new content. This way, you'll be the first to know whenever we upload a new video. We put in a lot of effort to provide you with the best content for your enjoyment. From brainstorming ideas to the final edit, our team works tirelessly to bring you informative and entertaining videos. So please don't hesitate to support us by subscribing. Your subscription not only motivates us, but also helps us grow and reach a wider audience. Are you ready? Let's begin our journey through history. We have an exciting episode lined up for you today, filled with fascinating insights and captivating stories. Let's dive in.
The First World War was a global conflict that engulfed Europe and beyond from 1914 to 1918. It was a war that nobody wanted, but one that almost everyone prepared for. A complex web of factors contributed to the outbreak of this devastating war, turning a regional crisis into a global catastrophe. This essay will examine the key causes of World War I, from the intricate system of alliances to the escalating arms race. We will explore the rise of nationalism and the bitter competition for empires that fueled tensions across Europe. Finally, we will look at the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the event that lit the fuse of this global conflict. The First World War was a tragedy of miscalculation. European leaders stumbled into a conflict that would cost millions of lives and reshape the political map of the world. By understanding the causes of this war, we can learn from the mistakes of the past and strive for a more peaceful future. One of the key factors that led to World War I was the system of alliances that had developed in Europe in the decades leading up to the war. These alliances were meant to deter aggression and maintain peace, but instead served to entangle nations in conflicts that were not their own. The Triple Alliance, formed in 1882, consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. This alliance was formed in response to the perceived threat of France and Russia. The Triple Entente, formed in 1907, brought together France, Russia, and Great Britain. This alliance was a counterbalance to the Triple Alliance, and was meant to contain German expansionism. These alliances created a situation where a conflict between any two nations could quickly escalate into a wider war. If one nation went to war, its allies were obligated to come to its aid. This system of interlocking alliances turned a regional crisis in the Balkans into a global conflict. In the years leading up to World War I, the great powers of Europe engaged in a massive arms race. Driven by fear, suspicion, and a desire for national prestige, each country sought to build bigger armies and more powerful navies. Germany, under the leadership of Kaiser Wilhelm II, embarked on an ambitious program of naval expansion. This was seen as a direct challenge to Great Britain's long-standing naval dominance. The race to build dreadnoughts, a new class of powerful battleships, further fueled tensions between the two countries. On the continent, the arms race focused on building up large standing armies. Conscription, or mandatory military service, became increasingly common. By 1914, millions of men were under arms, and Europe was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Nationalism, a powerful force in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, played a significant role in the outbreak of World War I. Nationalism is the belief that one's own nation is superior to others, and that it should have its own independent state. In Europe, nationalism manifested itself in different ways. For countries like Germany and Italy, recently unified, it was a source of national pride and a desire for greater power on the world stage. In the Balkans, a region with a long history of ethnic and religious conflict, nationalism took the form of separatist movements seeking independence from empires like Austria-Hungary. This rise of nationalism, while promoting unity within nations, often led to friction and rivalry between them. It fostered an environment of distrust and suspicion, making it difficult for nations to find common ground and resolve their differences peacefully. Imperialism, the pursuit of colonies and empires, was another major contributing factor to the outbreak of World War I. In the late 19th century, European powers engaged in a scramble for colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. This competition for colonies brought them into conflict with each other. For example, Britain and Germany clashed over colonies in Africa, while France and Germany had rival ambitions in Morocco. These colonial rivalries heightened tensions and created a climate of distrust among the great powers. The pursuit of colonies was not just about economic gain, it was also about prestige and national pride. Having a large empire was seen as a sign of a nation's strength and importance in the world. This competition for colonies, fueled by nationalism and economic ambition, helped to set the stage for World War I. Section 6. The Balkans, a powder keg. The Balkans, a region in southeastern Europe, was a hotbed of ethnic and religious tensions in the early 20th century. This region, often referred to as the powder keg of Europe, played a pivotal role in the events leading up to World War I. The Ottoman Empire, which had once controlled much of the Balkans, was in decline. As the Ottoman Empire weakened, nationalist movements emerged, seeking independence for various ethnic groups. Austria-Hungary, eager to expand its influence in the region, annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908. This annexation angered Serbia, which saw itself as a protector of the Slavic peoples in the Balkans. The rivalry between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, fueled by nationalism and territorial disputes, created a dangerous situation in the Balkans. This region, with its complex web of alliances and rivalries, became the flashpoint for World War I. Section 7. Sarajevo, the spark that ignited the world. The immediate trigger for World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie, on June 28, 1914. The assassination took place in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, during an official visit by the Archduke. The assassin, Gavrilo Princip, was a 19-year-old Serbian nationalist. He was a member of the Black Hand, a secret society that sought to unite all Serbs under one rule. The assassination was a carefully planned operation, intended to strike a blow against Austro-Hungarian rule in the Balkans. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand sent shockwaves through Europe. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the assassination, blamed Serbia for the attack. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding satisfaction for the assassination. Section 8. July Crisis. The diplomatic dominoes fall. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand triggered a chain reaction that plunged Europe into war in just over a month. This period, known as the July Crisis, was marked by frantic diplomatic efforts, ultimatums, and military mobilizations. Austria-Hungary, determined to punish Serbia, issued a harsh ultimatum that Serbia could not fully accept. Serbia, backed by Russia, mobilized its army. Germany, bound by its alliance with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia and its ally France. Great Britain, initially hesitant to intervene, declared war on Germany after Germany violated Belgian neutrality by invading the country on its way to attack France. The complex system of alliances that had been designed to prevent war had instead drawn the great powers of Europe into a conflict that none of them had anticipated or desired. Section 9. Conclusion. The Tragedy of Miscalculation. The outbreak of World War I was a tragedy of miscalculation, a result of the complex interplay of nationalism, imperialism, and the alliance system. The great powers of Europe, driven by fear, ambition, and a sense of national pride, stumbled into a conflict that would cost millions of lives and reshape the political landscape of the world. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited the powder keg, but the underlying causes of the war ran much deeper. The alliance system, designed to deter aggression, instead served to entangle nations in conflicts that were not their own. The arms race created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, while nationalism and imperialism fueled rivalries and made it difficult for nations to find common ground. World War I was a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked nationalism, the folly of arms races, and the devastating consequences of miscalculation in international relations.
The First World War, a global conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, engulfed Europe and beyond from 1914 to 1918. At the heart of this war were two powerful alliances, the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. These alliances, bound by treaties and fueled by nationalism, rivalry, and ambition, drew nations into a conflict that would reshape the political landscape of the 20th century. The Central Powers, initially consisting of Germany and Austria-Hungary, represented a bloc of empires seeking to maintain their influence and expand their territories. They were later joined by the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria, forming a formidable alliance that stretched from the Western Front to the Middle East. The Allied powers, initially led by France, Russia, and Great Britain, grew into a vast coalition of nations united in their opposition to the Central Powers. They fought to defend their own interests, protect smaller nations, and ultimately to bring an end to the war. The clash between these two alliances resulted in a global conflict that claimed millions of lives and left an indelible mark on human history. The war's impact would be felt for generations to come, shaping the political, social, and economic landscape of the world. The Central Powers, united by a complex web of alliances and shared ambitions, emerged as a formidable force in the years leading up to World War I. Led by Germany, the alliance also included Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. Each member brought its own strengths and weaknesses to the alliance, shaping the course of the war. Germany, with its powerful military and industrialized economy, was the driving force behind the Central Powers. Its ambitions for European dominance and its desire to secure its place as a global power fueled its entry into the war. Austria-Hungary, a sprawling empire facing internal tensions, sought to maintain its influence in the Balkans. The Ottoman Empire, once a mighty power, was in decline by the early 20th century. However, its strategic location, controlling access to the Black Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, made it a valuable ally for the Central Powers. Bulgaria, seeking to regain territory lost in previous conflicts, joined the alliance in 1915, hoping to benefit from a Central Powers victory. Together, these nations formed a formidable alliance that posed a significant threat to the Allied powers. Their combined military strength, strategic resources, and geographic position made them a force to be reckoned with in the global conflict that was to come. Germany's strategic position in Europe, bordered by potential enemies on both its eastern and western flanks, presented a significant challenge in the event of a major war. To address this challenge, German military planners developed the Schlieffen Plan, a bold and risky strategy designed to secure a swift victory. The Schlieffen Plan called for a rapid knockout blow against France in the west, exploiting the perceived weakness of the French army and the speed of German mobilization. The plan envisioned a massive German force sweeping through neutral Belgium, encircling Paris, and forcing a French surrender within weeks. With France defeated, Germany would then turn its full attention to Russia in the east, where the vast distances and slower Russian mobilization were expected to give Germany the advantage. The Schlieffen Plan, however, was based on a series of assumptions that proved to be flawed. The plan underestimated the speed and determination of the French and British resistance, as well as the logistical challenges of moving and supplying such a large force. The invasion of Belgium also brought Great Britain into the war, adding another powerful enemy to Germany's already formidable list of opponents. Austria-Hungary, a sprawling empire of diverse ethnicities and languages, entered World War I with the aim of preserving its diminishing influence in the Balkans. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, by a Serbian nationalist in Sarajevo provided the spark that ignited the conflict. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany's unwavering support, issued an ultimatum to Serbia demanding concessions that Serbia was unwilling to accept. This set in motion a chain of events that rapidly escalated into a wider European war. Austria-Hungary's military, however, was ill-prepared for a modern large-scale conflict. Its army, plagued by logistical problems and hampered by internal ethnic tensions, struggled against the Serbian forces. The Austro-Hungarian forces also faced determined resistance from Russia on the Eastern Front, further stretching their resources and manpower. The empire's internal weaknesses, coupled with the challenges of fighting on multiple fronts, ultimately contributed to its decline and eventual dissolution in the aftermath of World War I. The war exposed the fragility of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and hastened its demise, reshaping the political landscape of Central Europe. Section 5. The Ottoman Empire, a fading power in a global conflict. The Ottoman Empire, once mighty, entered World War I weakened. Years of decline and strife had taken their toll. Despite this, its strategic location made it valuable to the Central Powers. The Ottomans joined the war in 1914, hoping to regain lost territories. Their involvement opened new fronts and had significant consequences. Section 6. The Allied Powers, a coalition forged in war. The Allied Powers, a coalition of nations united in their opposition to the Central Powers, emerged as a formidable force during World War I. Initially consisting of France, Russia, and Great Britain, the alliance grew to encompass numerous other countries, each with its own motivations and objectives. France, seeking to regain Alsace-Lorraine, territories lost to Germany in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, entered the war with a fierce determination to defend its borders and reclaim its lost provinces. Russia, driven by pan-Slavic ideals and a desire to protect Serbia, mobilized its vast army, posing a significant threat to the Central Powers on the Eastern Front. Great Britain, initially hesitant to intervene in a continental conflict, joined the war after Germany's invasion of neutral Belgium. The British Empire's vast resources, global reach, and powerful navy proved to be invaluable assets to the Allied cause. As the war progressed, other nations joined the Allied powers, including Italy, Japan, and the United States. Each country brought its own unique strengths and resources to the alliance, contributing to the eventual victory over the Central Powers. Section 7. Great Britain, the Empire at War. Great Britain, a global power with a vast empire and a powerful navy, played a pivotal role in the Allied victory in World War I. Britain's entry into the war in August 1914, following Germany's invasion of Belgium, was a turning point. The British Expeditionary Force played a crucial role in halting the German advance early in the war. The Battle of the Marne in September 1914 marked a strategic Allied victory. The British Empire's global reach was invaluable to the Allied war effort. Troops from Canada, Australia, New Zealand and India fought alongside British forces. The Royal Navy's blockade of Germany cut off vital supplies. The Battle of Jutland in 1916 demonstrated the Royal Navy's dominance. Section 8. France. Holding the line on the Western Front. France, invaded by Germany in the opening days of World War I, bore the brunt of the fighting on the Western Front. The French army, though initially outmaneuvered by the German Schlieffen Plan, fought with tenacity and determination, holding back the German advance and preventing a swift victory. The Battle of the Marne, fought in September 1914, marked a turning point in the war, halting the German advance and forcing a retreat. The Western Front then settled into a brutal stalemate characterized by trench warfare, attritional battles and heavy casualties. The French army, despite suffering heavy losses, held firm against repeated German offensives. The Battle of Verdun, fought throughout 1916, became a symbol of French resilience and determination. Despite suffering enormous casualties, the French army successfully defended Verdun, inflicting heavy losses on the German attackers. The French people, their country occupied, and their army locked in a bloody stalemate, endured immense hardships during the war. The spirit of resistance, however, remained strong, and France emerged from the conflict victorious, though scarred by the experience. Section 9. The Eastern Front, Russia's struggle and collapse. Russia, driven by pan-Slavic ideals and a desire to protect Serbia, entered World War I with the largest army in the world. The Eastern Front, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, became a theatre of vast battles, sweeping movements, and immense casualties. The Russian army, though numerically superior to its opponents, suffered from logistical problems, inadequate equipment, and poor leadership. The vast distances and harsh conditions of the Eastern Front also presented significant challenges. Despite these challenges, the Russian army achieved some notable victories in the early stages of the war, particularly against Austria-Hungary. However, repeated defeats against Germany, coupled with mounting casualties and economic hardship, took their toll on Russian morale. The Russian Revolution of 1917, sparked by social unrest, economic hardship, and the war's devastating impact, led to the collapse of the Tsarist regime and the rise of the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in 1918, withdrawing Russia from World War I.
The year is 1914. Europe stands on the brink of a monumental conflict. Europe is a powder keg of tension. Nationalism runs high and alliances bind nations together in a fragile balance. The continent is a ticking time bomb. On June 28, a spark ignites the powder keg. The assassination of a key figure sets off a chain reaction. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is assassinated in Sarajevo. His death becomes the catalyst for war. The assassin, Gavrilo Princip, is a Serbian nationalist. His actions are driven by a desire for independence. Austria-Hungary blames Serbia for the assassination and declares war. The declaration sets off a domino effect. A complex web of alliances kicks in, pulling more countries into the conflict. The stage is set for a massive confrontation. Germany pledges support to Austria-Hungary, further escalating the situation. Russia mobilizes to defend Serbia, preparing its vast army for war. Germany declares war on Russia and its ally France. The conflict spreads rapidly. Germany then invades neutral Belgium to reach France quickly. This aggressive move shocks the world. This act brings Great Britain into the war, honoring its pledge to defend Belgium. The conflict now involves all the major powers of Europe. World War I has begun. The scale of the war is unprecedented. The world watches in disbelief as the conflict escalates. Nations are drawn into a war they never anticipated. What began as a regional conflict has exploded into a global war. The implications are far-reaching. Millions of soldiers will be mobilized and countless lives will be changed forever. New technologies of warfare will bring unprecedented death and destruction. The face of combat is forever altered. The world will never be the same. The Great War leaves an indelible mark on history. The Western Front becomes a defining theater of World War I, a place where the fate of nations would be decided. Germany's Schlieffen Plan aims for a swift victory over France, hoping to avoid a prolonged conflict. German forces sweep through Belgium, aiming to encircle Paris and deliver a knockout blow to the French army. However, they are halted at the First Battle of the Marne in September 1914. The Schlieffen Plan fails, and the war takes a new turn. Trench warfare becomes the defining feature of the Western Front, with soldiers digging in for a long and grueling conflict. From the North Sea to Switzerland, opposing armies dig in, creating an unbroken line of trenches stretching hundreds of miles. A desolate landscape of trenches, barbed wire and machine gun nests emerges, transforming the countryside into a deadly maze. Attacks are met with devastating firepower, making any advance costly and dangerous. Gains are measured in yards, often at a terrible cost in human life, with no clear end in sight. Battles on the Western Front become infamous for their brutality, with soldiers enduring unimaginable hardships. The Battle of the Somme, launched by the British in July 1916, becomes a symbol of the horrors of trench warfare, showcasing the futility and devastation of the conflict. On the first day alone, the British Army suffers nearly 60,000 casualties, a staggering loss that shocks the world. The battle rages for months, with minimal gains and staggering losses on both sides, epitomizing the grueling stalemate of the Western Front. The Eastern Front contrasts sharply with the stalemate in the West. Unlike the Western Front, where trench warfare led to a prolonged deadlock, the Eastern Front was marked by its dynamic and ever-changing battle lines. Here, vast distances and limited infrastructure make trench warfare impractical. The sheer scale of the terrain meant that armies had to be more mobile and flexible in their strategies. The war is more fluid, characterized by sweeping movements of troops. Cavalry charges and rapid advances were more common, as both sides sought to outmaneuver each other. Russia, with its vast manpower reserves, initially poses a significant threat to the Central Powers. The sheer number of Russian soldiers seemed overwhelming at first. However, Russia's army is poorly equipped and led. Despite their numbers, Russian troops often lacked the necessary supplies and effective leadership to sustain prolonged campaigns. German military leadership proves more adaptable and effective. The Germans were able to capitalize on their superior tactics and better coordination. The Battle of Tannenberg in August 1914 is a major turning point on the Eastern Front. This battle showcased the strategic brilliance of the German commanders. German forces led by generals Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff decisively defeat the Russian Second Army. This victory not only boosted German morale but also significantly weakened the Russian military presence in the region. The battle establishes German military superiority in the east. It was a clear demonstration of the effectiveness of German strategy and planning. Despite setbacks, Russia continues to fight. The Russian spirit and determination kept them in the war, even as they faced numerous challenges. However, the strain of war takes its toll. The Russian economy falters. The prolonged conflict drained resources and led to widespread hardship. Food shortages and social unrest gripped the country. The civilian population suffered immensely, leading to growing discontent and unrest. In 1917, revolution erupts in Russia. The cumulative pressures of war, economic hardship and social unrest culminated in a dramatic upheaval. Tsar Nicholas II is forced to abdicate. The centuries-old autocracy crumbled under the weight of its failures. The Romanov dynasty, which had ruled Russia for centuries, comes to an end. This marked a significant turning point in Russian history, leading to the rise of a new political order. The Ottoman Empire, once a mighty power, enters the war on the side of the Central Powers. The empire is already in decline, weakened by internal strife and territorial losses. Joining the war proves to be a fateful decision. The Gallipoli campaign of 1915 to 1916 is a major disaster for the Allies. British, French, Australian and New Zealand troops land on the Gallipoli Peninsula, aiming to seize control of the Dardanelles Strait. However, the Ottoman defense, bolstered by German support, proves to be formidable. The Allies are forced to evacuate, having suffered heavy casualties. While the Ottomans hold their own at Gallipoli, they face growing challenges elsewhere. Arab nationalism is on the rise. British forces, aided by Arab rebels, launch offensives in the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire, already weakened, begins to crumble from within. For the first 3 years of the war, the United States remains neutral. However, events begin to draw America closer to the conflict. Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting neutral shipping, angers the American public, The sinking of the Lusitania, a British passenger liner in 1915, with the loss of over 1,000 lives, including 128 Americans, further inflames anti-German sentiment. In early 1917, Germany makes a fateful decision. Hoping to break the stalemate in the Atlantic, Germany resumes unrestricted submarine warfare. German leaders believe they can defeat Britain before the United States can effectively intervene. The German gamble backfires. The resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, coupled with the interception of the Zimmermann telegram, a secret German diplomatic cable proposing an alliance with Mexico against the United States, pushes America over the edge. On April 6, 1917, the United States declares war on Germany. Section 6. The Tide Turns, Allied Offensives. America's entry into the war has a profound impact. Fresh American troops, along with much-needed supplies and financial resources, bolster the Allied war effort. The arrival of American forces helps to tip the balance of power in favor of the Allies. In 1918, the Allies launch a series of offensives on the Western Front. The German army, exhausted by years of war and facing overwhelming Allied numbers and resources, begins to crumble. The final German offensive in the spring of 1918 fails to achieve its objectives. The initiative passes decisively to the Allies. The 100 Days Offensive, launched by the Allies in August 1918, marks the beginning of the end for Germany. Allied forces, spearheaded by British, French, and American troops, advance relentlessly. German resistance crumbles. By November, it is clear that Germany can no longer hope to win the war. Section 7. The Collapse of the Central Powers. As the German army retreats, the other Central Powers also collapse. Austria-Hungary, racked by internal dissent and facing military defeat on multiple fronts, disintegrates. The Ottoman Empire, defeated in the Middle East, signs an armistice with the Allies. On November 11, 1918, Germany signs the Armistice of Compiègne, ending the fighting on the Western Front. The Great War is over. Section 8. The Armistice and its Aftermath. The armistice brings an end to the fighting, but it does not bring peace. The world is in chaos. Millions lie dead. Empires have crumbled. The old order has been shattered. The Paris Peace Conference, convened in 1919, aims to redraw the map of Europe and establish a lasting peace. However, the peacemakers face a daunting task. The victors are determined to punish Germany and prevent future aggression. Germany, though defeated, resents the harsh terms imposed upon it. The Treaty of Versailles, signed with Germany in 1919, becomes a source of resentment and instability. Germany is forced to accept blame for the war, cede territory, disarm, and pay heavy reparations. The treaty, while intended to prevent future conflict, sows the seeds of future discord. Section 9. Conclusion. A world transformed. World War I leaves an indelible mark on the 20th century. The war reshapes the political map of Europe, destroys empires, and ushers in an era of revolution and uncertainty. New technologies of warfare result in unprecedented levels of death and destruction. The war also has a profound impact on the lives of ordinary people. Millions are killed or wounded. Societies are traumatized by the scale of the carnage. The war accelerates social and political change, leading to the rise of new ideologies and movements. World War I is a watershed moment in human history. It is a conflict that changes the world forever, leaving behind a legacy of loss, trauma, and uncertainty. The war to end all wars, as it is tragically known, fails to achieve its objective. Instead, it sets the stage for future conflicts, including the even more devastating World War II.
The year 1918 marked the end of a tumultuous period in human history. It was a year that would be remembered for its profound impact on the world, a year that saw the culmination of a conflict that had engulfed nations and shattered lives. The Great War, as it was then known, had ravaged Europe for over 4 years. The scale of destruction was unprecedented, with entire towns and villages reduced to rubble, and the landscape forever scarred by the relentless bombardments. Millions lay dead, victims of a conflict that had spiraled into unprecedented brutality. The human cost was staggering, with countless families mourning the loss of loved ones and entire generations left scarred by the horrors of war. The hope for a swift resolution had long faded, replaced by a grim determination to see the conflict through to its bitter end. Soldiers endured unimaginable hardships in the trenches, facing not only the enemy but also the harsh elements and the constant threat of disease. The year 1918 would see dramatic shifts in fortune, culminating in the collapse of empires and a peace treaty that sowed the seeds for future conflict. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June 1919, aimed to bring lasting peace, but instead laid the groundwork for further tensions. The war's end was not a sudden event. It was a series of gradual steps marked by armistices and negotiations as exhausted nations sought to bring an end to the bloodshed. The armistice of November 11, 1918, marked the cessation of hostilities on the Western Front. It was a gradual unraveling of alliances, economies, and morale. The war had taken a toll not just on the battlefield, but also on the home front, with economies strained to the breaking point and civilian populations enduring severe hardships. Germany, once a formidable military power, found itself increasingly isolated and depleted. The relentless Allied offensives and the internal strife within Germany led to its eventual capitulation. On the other side, the Allied forces, bolstered by the late entry of the United States, gathered strength for a final push. The fresh American troops provided a much-needed boost to the weary Allied soldiers, tipping the balance in their favor. The stage was set for a dramatic conclusion to a conflict that had reshaped the political landscape of Europe and left an indelible mark on the 20th century. The aftermath of the war would see the rise of new nations, the fall of old empires, and a world forever changed by the lessons learned from this devastating conflict. In 1917, a seismic event shook the foundations of the war, the Russian Revolution. This monumental uprising was not just a political upheaval, but a social and economic one as well, fundamentally altering the course of history. The Romanov dynasty, which had ruled Russia for centuries, was overthrown. The fall of the Romanovs marked the end of an era and the beginning of a tumultuous period for Russia. The Tsar was deposed, and a new government led by the Bolsheviks under Vladimir Lenin came to power. Lenin's leadership was pivotal in steering the revolution towards its radical goals. The Bolsheviks, committed to their communist ideology, were eager to end Russia's involvement in the costly war. They believed that peace was essential for the survival and consolidation of their new regime. Their priority was to consolidate their power and rebuild the shattered Russian economy. The country was in ruins, and the Bolsheviks faced the enormous task of reconstruction. The new Russian government quickly sued for peace with Germany. They sought to extricate Russia from the war to focus on internal issues. The resulting Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, signed in March 1918, came at a heavy price for Russia. The terms were harsh and demanded significant territorial concessions. Vast territories were ceded to Germany, including Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states. These losses were a severe blow to the new Russian state. However, the treaty came as a double-edged sword for Germany. While it freed up troops from the Eastern Front, it also had unintended consequences. While it freed up troops from the Eastern Front, it also allowed the spread of communist ideology into Germany, further destabilizing the war-weary nation. The seeds of unrest were sown, leading to significant political upheaval in Germany. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk had a significant impact on Germany's military strategy. With Russia out of the war, Germany could now focus its resources on a single front in the West. Troops from the Eastern Front were redeployed to France and Belgium, bolstering German forces for a renewed offensive. For a brief period, it seemed that Germany might yet snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. The German Spring Offensive of 1918, spearheaded by seasoned troops from the Eastern Front, initially caught the Allied forces off guard. German forces made significant advances, pushing deep into Allied territory. However, the offensive ultimately faltered. The German army was exhausted, and their supply lines were stretched thin. The Allied forces, bolstered by fresh American troops, rallied and launched a successful counteroffensive. Despite the initial success of the Spring Offensive, The tide of war had turned decisively against Germany. The arrival of American troops, coupled with the growing exhaustion of the German army and civilian population, spelled doom for Germany's war effort. The failure of the spring offensive had sapped German morale and depleted their already strained resources. The final months of the war saw a series of Allied victories. The German army, facing overwhelming numbers and dwindling supplies, was forced into retreat. By the autumn of 1918, it was clear that Germany could no longer sustain its war effort. Mutiny broke out within the German Navy, and civilian unrest spread throughout the country. The German government, facing imminent collapse, was forced to seek an armistice. Section 5. Internal struggles, cracks in the German facade. While German troops fought valiantly on the front lines, the home front was crumbling. Years of war had taken a heavy toll on the German economy. Food shortages were rampant, and civilian morale was at an all-time low. The British naval blockade of German ports had crippled the German economy, leading to widespread hardship and discontent. The German government's propaganda machine, which had for years effectively rallied the population behind the war effort, was losing its grip. The harsh realities of war, combined with the growing influence of socialist and communist ideas, fueled a wave of anti-war sentiment. Strikes and protests erupted across Germany, further undermining the war effort. Section 6. Armistice. The guns fall silent. On November 11th, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. After more than 4 years of brutal warfare, an armistice was signed between Germany and the Allied powers. The armistice, signed in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, marked the end of hostilities. The terms of the armistice were dictated by the victors. Germany was forced to agree to a humiliating surrender, including the withdrawal of its troops from occupied territories, the surrender of its fleet, and the disarmament of its army. For the people of Europe, exhausted and traumatized by years of war, the armistice brought immense relief. The war to end all wars, as it was optimistically called, was finally over. Section 7. Treaty of Versailles. Seeds of resentment. The following year, in 1919, representatives from the victorious Allied powers gathered in Paris to formally end the war and redraw the map of Europe. The resulting Treaty of Versailles, signed in the Palace of Versailles, was intended to ensure a lasting peace. However, the treaty, instead of healing the wounds of war, would sow the seeds for future conflict. The Treaty of Versailles was particularly harsh on Germany. The treaty held Germany solely responsible for the war and imposed crippling reparations payments. Germany was stripped of its colonies, its territory was reduced, and its military was severely restricted. The treaty was a source of deep humiliation and resentment for the German people, who felt that they had been unjustly punished. Section 8. Legacy of Versailles, a flawed peace. The Treaty of Versailles had a profound impact on Germany. The economic burden of reparations crippled the German economy, fueling hyperinflation and social unrest. The loss of territory and the restrictions on its military left Germany feeling vulnerable and humiliated. The treaty fostered a deep sense of resentment among the German people, creating fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. The treaty's failure to address the underlying causes of the war, such as nationalism, imperialism, and the complex web of alliances, also contributed to the outbreak of World War II. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent another global conflict, ultimately created the conditions that made another war almost inevitable. Section 9. Conclusion: from one war to another. The end of World War I marked the beginning of a new era, one characterized by uncertainty, instability, and the lingering trauma of war. The jubilant celebrations that erupted in the streets masked the deep scars left on the hearts and minds of millions. Soldiers returned home, but many found it difficult to reintegrate into a society that had been forever changed by the horrors they had witnessed. The Treaty of Versailles, while bringing an official end to the conflict, failed to create a lasting peace. Instead, it sowed the seeds of resentment and anger, particularly in Germany, where the harsh terms of the treaty were seen as a national humiliation. The economic reparations demanded by the treaty crippled the German economy, leading to widespread poverty and social unrest. The harsh terms imposed on Germany, coupled with the treaty's failure to address the underlying causes of the war, set the stage for another, even more devastating conflict 2 decades later. The rise of Adolf Hitler and the militarization of Germany were direct consequences of the unresolved issues left by the Treaty of Versailles. The end of World War I serves as a stark reminder that even in victory, the seeds of future conflict can be sown. The battlefields and war memorials stand as silent witnesses to the cost of war, urging us to remember the lessons of the past. It is a lesson that resonates to this day, urging us to strive for a more just and equitable world order to prevent the horrors of war from recurring. The efforts of modern peace rallies and international organizations like the United Nations remind us that the pursuit of peace is an ongoing journey, one that requires the collective effort of all humanity. World War I, the war to end all wars, tragically fell short of its title. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, leaving an indelible mark on the 20th century. From 1914 to 1918, the world watched in horror as Europe tore itself apart. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo ignited a powder keg of nationalism, imperialism, and intricate alliances. The consequences of this global conflict were far-reaching, reshaping the political, economic, and social landscape of the world. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefield. Empires crumbled, new nations emerged, and the global balance of power shifted dramatically. Economies lay in ruins, and societies grappled with the trauma of unprecedented casualties and social upheaval. The world that emerged from the ashes of World War I was forever changed, haunted by the spectre of conflict and forever marked by the lessons learned. The war's conclusion in 1918 brought with it the collapse of centuries-old empires, marking a significant turning point in world history. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires all crumbled under the weight of war and internal strife, leading to a dramatic shift in global power dynamics. The map of Europe was redrawn, with new nations emerging from the wreckage, altering the political landscape of the continent. Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Poland were among the newly independent states that emerged from the ashes of empires, each seeking to establish their own identity and governance. This redrawing of borders, however, did not come without its own set of problems, as new boundaries often cut across ethnic and cultural lines. Ethnic tensions, border disputes, and economic instability plagued many of these new nations, creating a volatile environment. The seeds of future conflicts were sown in the post-war settlements as competing national interests and unresolved grievances festered, setting the stage for future turmoil. The Treaty of Versailles, intended to ensure lasting peace, instead sowed the seeds of resentment and instability, particularly in Germany. Germany, in particular, felt humiliated by the treaty's harsh terms, which included crippling reparations, payments, and territorial losses, fueling a sense of national grievance. This sense of grievance would contribute to the rise of extremist ideologies in the coming decades, ultimately leading to further global conflict. The economic consequences of World War I were as profound as the political upheaval. The war had been a total war, with entire economies mobilized for the war effort. Years of fighting left Europe devastated, its industrial heartland in ruins. Millions were dead, infrastructure was destroyed, and agricultural production plummeted. The financial cost of the war was staggering, leaving the major European powers deeply in debt. While Europe struggled to rebuild, the United States emerged from the war as a global economic powerhouse. The US had entered the war later than the European powers and had not suffered the same level of physical destruction. Moreover, the war had transformed the US from a debtor nation to a creditor nation, as European countries borrowed heavily to finance their war efforts. This shift in economic power had significant geopolitical implications, with the US poised to play a more prominent role on the world stage. The human cost of World War I was staggering. An estimated 15 to 22 million people perished, including soldiers and civilians. Millions more were wounded, many left with life-altering injuries. the war left countless families shattered and entire communities decimated. The psychological scars of the war ran deep as returning soldiers struggled to cope with the horrors they had witnessed. The lost generation, as they came to be known, grappled with disillusionment, trauma, and a sense of profound loss. The war also led to mass displacement as refugees fled war-torn regions or were forced from their homes due to changing borders. The collapse of empires and the redrawing of national boundaries created millions of refugees, creating a humanitarian crisis in the aftermath of the war. The scale of human suffering was unprecedented, leaving a deep scar on the collective memory of Europe and the world. Section 5. Social upheaval, shifting gender roles and the flu pandemic. World War I also led to significant social changes. With millions of men away fighting, women were called upon to fill traditionally male roles in the workforce. Women worked in factories, farms and offices, challenging traditional gender roles and demonstrating their capabilities in new ways. This wartime experience contributed to the growing movement for women's suffrage and greater social equality. However, the war's end did not bring an end to hardship. As if the war itself were not enough, the world was gripped by a devastating influenza pandemic in 1918. The Spanish flu, as it came to be known, spread rapidly across the globe, killing an estimated 50 to 100 million people. The pandemic exacerbated the social and economic dislocation caused by the war, further straining healthcare systems and adding to the sense of despair and uncertainty. Section 6. The seeds of discord, unresolved issues, and the rise of extremism. The war's end did not bring the lasting peace that many had hoped for. Instead, it left a continent in ruins, both physically and emotionally. Instead, it sowed the seeds of future conflicts. The political landscape was forever altered, and the scars of war were deeply etched into the collective consciousness. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, contained within it the very elements that would contribute to the outbreak of World War II. Its punitive measures against Germany created a sense of injustice and resentment. Germany, humiliated by the treaty's harsh terms, became fertile ground for extremist ideologies like Nazism. The economic hardships and national humiliation were too much to bear for many. The desire for revenge and the belief that Germany had been betrayed by its own leaders and by the victorious Allies fueled the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. This sense of betrayal was a powerful motivator. Moreover, the war had left unresolved territorial disputes and ethnic tensions simmering in various parts of Europe. These disputes were like ticking time bombs waiting to explode. The collapse of empires and the creation of new nations, while seemingly a victory for self-determination, also created new sources of conflict. The new borders often ignored ethnic and cultural realities. The post-war world was a tinderbox, and it would not take long for the flames of war to ignite once more. The unresolved issues and rising extremism set the stage for another devastating conflict. Section 7. America's rise from isolationism to global power. While Europe struggled to rebuild, the United States emerged from World War I as a global power. Though initially reluctant to get involved in the war, the US had played a decisive role in the Allied victory. The war had transformed the US from a debtor nation to a creditor nation, and its industrial might was unmatched. However, the US was hesitant to embrace its new role as a global leader. The American public, weary of war, favored a return to isolationism. The US Senate refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles or join the League of Nations, the international organization created to prevent future wars. This reluctance to engage in international affairs would have significant consequences in the coming decades as the world drifted towards another global conflict. Section 8. A world forever changed. The long shadow of the Great War. World War I cast a long shadow over the 20th century. It marked the end of an era, shattering the old order and ushering in a new world of uncertainty and change. The war's consequences were far-reaching, shaping the political, economic and social landscape of the world for decades to come. It led to the rise of new ideologies, the redrawing of national boundaries, and the transformation of global power dynamics. The war also left an indelible mark on the human psyche. The unprecedented scale of violence, the horrors of trench warfare, and the devastating impact of the influenza pandemic left a generation scarred. The war's legacy continues to shape the world today, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of diplomacy and international cooperation. Section 9. Conclusion. World War I. A catalyst for a century of change. World War I was a watershed moment in human history, marking a significant turning point. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, forever changing the course of the 20th century and beyond. The war's consequences were far-reaching, shaping the political, economic, and social landscape of the world for decades to come, influencing countless aspects of modern life. It led to the collapse of empires such as the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman Empires, the rise of new nations, redrawing the map of Europe and the Middle East, and a fundamental shift in global power dynamics, setting the stage for future geopolitical struggles. The war also left an indelible mark on the human psyche, shattering the illusion of progress and leaving a generation grappling with the horrors they had witnessed, both on and off the battlefield. The war to end all wars tragically failed to live up to its name, instead sowing the seeds of future conflicts, including the Second World War. The lessons of World War I, however, remain as relevant as ever, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of diplomacy, international cooperation, and a commitment to peace to prevent such a catastrophe from happening again. The Treaty of Versailles marked the official end of World War I. Signed in 1919, it aimed to prevent future wars. However, it sowed the seeds of discord. The treaty placed harsh penalties on Germany. These penalties fueled resentment and nationalism. This anger created fertile ground for extremist ideologies. The treaty blamed Germany for the war. It demanded massive reparations for the devastation. Germany was forced to cede territory and reduce its military. These terms were meant to cripple Germany's ability to wage war again, but they also crippled the German economy. The treaty's harshness had a profound impact on the German people. They felt humiliated and betrayed by their leaders. The economic hardship caused widespread poverty and unemployment. This created a sense of desperation and anger. The Treaty of Versailles, meant to ensure peace, instead fueled the flames of resentment. This resentment would have devastating consequences in the years to come. The social and economic turmoil in Germany created an opening for extremist groups. The Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, exploited this vulnerability. Hitler was a charismatic speaker. He tapped into the deep well of resentment over the Treaty of Versailles. He promised to restore Germany to its former glory. The Nazis offered scapegoats for Germany's problems. They blamed Jews, communists, and other minorities. This hateful rhetoric resonated with a population desperate for answers. The Nazis gained popularity by preying on fear and prejudice. As the economic situation worsened, support for the Nazis grew. They promised jobs, stability, and a return to national pride. The Nazis were masters of propaganda. They used rallies, posters, and radio broadcasts to spread their message. Fear, combined with promises of greatness, proved a potent mix. The Nazis gradually consolidated their power. They dismantled democratic institutions and established a totalitarian regime. The world watched with growing alarm as the seeds of hatred sown by the Treaty of Versailles bore their bitter fruit. The Treaty of Versailles redrew the map of Europe. New nations emerged from the ashes of empires. These new borders were often drawn hastily, with little regard for ethnic or cultural considerations. This led to instability and conflict. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires were dismantled. This created power vacuums that fueled regional tensions. Ethnic minorities found themselves trapped within the borders of new nations. They often faced discrimination and persecution. The treaty's attempts to create a lasting peace backfired. The arbitrary borders and forced migrations sowed the seeds of future conflicts. The legacy of resentment and instability would continue to haunt Europe for decades to come. World War I was a conflict unlike any before it. It was a war of attrition, fought on an unprecedented scale. New technologies emerged, forever changing the face of warfare. These innovations brought about unprecedented levels of death and destruction. Tanks, once clumsy prototypes, evolved into armored behemoths. They broke through trench lines and redefined ground warfare. Airplanes took to the skies first as reconnaissance tools, then as deadly weapons. Dogfights became a terrifying spectacle of aerial combat. Beneath the waves, submarines prowled the depths. These underwater predators targeted enemy ships, disrupting supply lines and bringing terror to the high seas. The development of these new weapons had a profound impact on military strategy and tactics. They also foreshadowed the even greater horrors to come in World War II. Section 5. A poisoned battlefield, chemical warfare, and the quest for international law. World War I witnessed the horrors of chemical warfare. Poison gas, a new and terrifying weapon, was unleashed on the battlefields. Chlorine, mustard gas, and phosgene gas caused excruciating pain and death. The use of chemical weapons shocked the world. Soldiers choked to death in the trenches, their lungs seared by poison. The psychological impact was devastating. The indiscriminate nature of gas attacks terrified soldiers and civilians alike. The horrors of chemical warfare spurred international outrage. After the war, efforts were made to ban these inhumane weapons. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 prohibited the use of chemical and biological weapons in warfare. This was a landmark agreement in international law. It reflected a growing global awareness of the need to regulate the horrors of war. However, the threat of chemical warfare remained. The development of even deadlier chemical agents continued. Section 6. Shifting tides of power, the decline of Europe and the rise of new giants. World War I marked a turning point in global power dynamics. Europe, ravaged by war, emerged weakened and exhausted. The United States, relatively unscathed by the conflict, emerged as a major economic and military power. Japan, an ally of Great Britain during the war, also saw its influence grow. It expanded its territorial ambitions in Asia. The war had shifted the balance of power. Europe's dominance on the world stage was waning. The rise of new powers had profound implications for international relations. The United States, hesitant to become entangled in European affairs, adopted a policy of isolationism. This would have significant consequences in the lead-up to World War II. The global stage was set for a new era of geopolitical competition. Section 7. Scars on the Canvas, World War I's enduring mark on art and literature. World War I left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape. The horrors of war found expression in art, literature, and music. A generation of artists grappled with the trauma of the trenches, the loss of innocence, and the fragility of peace. Erich Maria Remarque's novel All Quiet on the Western Front offered a searing indictment of war's brutality. The novel captured the disillusionment and despair of a generation scarred by conflict. It became an international bestseller, resonating with readers who had experienced the war firsthand. Painters like Otto Dix and George Grosz captured the grotesque realities of war in their art. Their works depicted the mutilated bodies, the shell-shocked soldiers, and the shattered landscapes. Dadaism, an art movement born out of the war's chaos, challenged traditional notions of art and meaning. It reflected the absurdity and senselessness of the conflict. Section 8. Echoes of change, social upheaval, women's roles, and the pacifist movement. World War I had a profound impact on social structures. The war effort required the mobilization of entire societies. Women, traditionally confined to domestic roles, entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. They filled factories, offices, and hospitals, challenging traditional gender roles. The war also fueled the growth of the pacifist movement. The horrors of trench warfare and the use of poison gas galvanized a generation opposed to war. Pacifist organizations gained prominence, advocating for peaceful resolution of international disputes. The war's impact on social and cultural norms was undeniable. The role of women in society had been irrevocably altered. The pacifist movement, though ultimately unable to prevent World War II, reflected a growing global consciousness about the futility of war. Section 9. A world transformed, World War I's enduring legacy. World War I was a watershed moment in human history. It shattered empires, redrew national borders, and ushered in an era of technological innovation. The war's legacy continues to shape the world today. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, ultimately sowed the seeds of discord. The harsh penalties imposed on Germany fueled resentment and nationalism, creating conditions that enabled the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The war's technological innovations, from tanks and airplanes to chemical weapons, revolutionized warfare and set the stage for even greater destruction in World War II. The war's cultural and social impact was equally profound. It inspired some of the most powerful anti-war art and literature ever created. It also led to significant social changes, including the expanded role of women in society and the growth of the pacifist movement. World War I serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of striving for peace. World War I was not just a major military conflict, but, a turning point that radically changed the course of human history. It was a war that involved more than 70 million military personnel, including 60 million Europeans, making it one of the largest wars in history. This war led to the collapse of major empires such as the Ottoman, German, Austro-Hungarian and Russian empires, reshaping the political map of the world. The fall of these empires paved the way for new ideologies and movements that would shape the 20th century. New nations were established, while others were dissolved, creating a new political reality full of tensions and disputes that lasted for decades. The redrawing of borders and the creation of new states often led to ethnic conflicts and political instability. Although the war officially ended with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, its effects did not stop with the fighting. The treaty imposed harsh penalties on Germany, which many historians believe sowed the seeds for World War II. It left behind a world struggling with chaos and instability. Cities lay in ruins and the social fabric of many nations was torn apart. European economies were devastated and exhausted by the war, leaving many nations in long periods of economic hardship, especially Germany, which was forced to pay massive reparations. The economic strain contributed to hyperinflation and widespread poverty. Global political gatherings, such as the establishment of the League of Nations, were the first attempts to achieve global peace, but ultimately failed to prevent another war. The League's inability to enforce its resolutions highlighted the need for a more robust international organization. The legacy of the war was tragic. The battlefields of World War I became somber memorials to the millions who perished. More than 16 million people lost their lives, in addition to millions of injured and disabled individuals. The human cost was staggering, with countless families torn apart by loss and grief. Societies suffered greatly, with poverty and unemployment spreading, while many countries faced post-war epidemics. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 1919 further compounded the suffering, claiming millions of lives worldwide. World War I is a constant reminder that wars come with a heavy price, whether in terms of human lives or global stability. The war's aftermath showed the world the devastating consequences of large-scale conflict. It serves as a timeless lesson to humanity that peace and coexistence are the best solutions for progress and prosperity. The post-war reconstruction efforts demonstrated the resilience and determination of people to rebuild and move forward. No matter how necessary conflicts may seem at the moment, their devastating consequences affect everyone without exception. The suffering endured by civilians during the war underscores the importance of seeking peaceful resolutions. If you find this topic fascinating and want to learn more about the historical events and stories that shaped our world, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support us in delivering rich and informative content. Your support helps us continue to explore and share the lessons of history. Activate the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Stay updated with our latest videos and join our community of history enthusiasts. Share the video with your friends to spread the knowledge. By sharing, you help others learn and appreciate the importance of history. Together, we can gain a deeper understanding of history and learn from it to build a better future. Let's use the lessons of the past to create a more peaceful and prosperous world. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Your engagement and curiosity drive us to continue exploring the past.